Okay. Oops. Welcome, everyone. Oh, Joan's coming in. So welcome. My name is Anita Thompson of Art Venture Workshops. I am a mobile-based art business. I teach primarily for libraries, but I also teach for recreation centers and group settings and all that kind of thing. And I teach all ages, kids, teens, adults. And it is my pleasure to be teaching you this morning. Thank you for joining us. And hello, Joan. I'm going to copy in the chat the supplies one more time, and we're going to get started. Like I mentioned, this is being recorded. So you will receive the recording by Monday through the library. This is in the Feasterville or Lower Southampton Library is sponsoring this program. But if you want it earlier, I can send it to you through my personal email because I'm using my Zoom to record it. So you need to have a drawing space of 7 inches down and 5 inches across. You can make an approximate if you want. I just like to measure it out so that I know what the drawing space is. So we're going to be using our pencil first. And I'm going to recommend, as I always do in my classes, if you've taken them before, to draw lightly. I will be drawing darker. The reason is because it doesn't show up as well on Zoom if I draw light. And for you, you want to make sure that your pencil marks are just enough so that you can see them, but we're going to be going over everything in colored pencil. Okay, so we're going to start first with sort of an outline of the shape of our rows. So we start with our big shapes first, and then we get into our details. Also, if anybody needs me to slow down, you can just put that in the chat since this is being recorded. And if you have any questions, you can also put those in the chat, and I usually check to make sure I see it pop up. So, okay, so getting started here, we're going to start at the top of our little square or rectangle here. And we're going to start with the overall shape of our rows. So what we're looking at right now is this shape in here. And so it's kind of like an oval. So when I say we start with basic shapes, our basic shapes are circles, ovals, rectangles, triangles, squares, that sort of thing. And then if we don't have a perfect shape to put it in, we kind of make it circular or, triangular, that sort of thing. All right, so starting here at the top, we're going to leave a little bit room at the top here before we start. And we're going to make our oval. So our oval is going to be kind of on the side here. And you're probably wondering, well, how big do I make the oval? For now, we are just going to guess about how big it is. And then we will adjust it as we get going. Because from this, we're also going to now make the shape of the rest of the rows. So we're looking at the petals here. We're going to look at the inside petals. So we're going to look at this shape going all the way around like this, and then adding on the outside. You can sort of add on the outside petal on the right as we're going around. All right, so starting here on the left, we're gonna kind of make almost like a vase shape, as if you were making a shape like putting flowers in a vase. So it kind of gets bulbous at the end, a little bit flat, and then it still expands a bit here. It's a little wider here at the bottom. And it gets a little more kind of almost square-like. And it also kind of dips up here. So it kind of lifts up a little bit. We're going to do that on that side too, but I figured this one is very prominent. So now your line's going to go in. So we're making this part here. And for now, you can just kind of curve it outward. And then we're going to come back in here and make a bit of a straight line for this area right here. I know that was a lot of instruction at once, so I'm going to let everybody catch up. And then we're going to adjust. Okay. So as you can see, some of my lines here, I have a few more, one or two that might be confusing you. So I'm just going to erase that one. So we're going to start back over here down on the right, and we're going to create the shape for the petal here on the right. There's a bit of a line, even though it really doesn't look like it, and that will be disappearing once we start to add the details. But I just want to give that to you now for purposes of drawing. And then the petal is sort of like the top of a heart, like the shape of the top of a heart, like this. So you see that? Kind of like that. And we're also going to go here on the left and take care of the bottom of the rose as well, those petals. So I had you make it flat, but we're going to go up a little bit here with our curve now. So what you're going to do is you're going to erase sort of the curve we put in, and you're going to start your line from here to curve it. So it gets from the flat part, you're going to kind of angle your curve. Okay. So now we're going to come back over here, like I mentioned, and we're going to create the bottom petal, or I should say the side petal. We're going to start from here. And then we're going to kind of wing out to the left. And then we're going to kind of make a bit of a point here. And the reason I'm leaving that like that, because we're then going to create the other petal that's coming up here. So I'm going to make mine a little bit lower. So this is where it's good to draw lightly because you have to make adjustments. So this is the top petal here that's kind of curving over. And we're just going to make it look like this for now. Let me erase this so it doesn't confuse you. So we're looking at an overall shape right now of this. And I'll let you get a little caught up on that. And we're going to go back to this section right here because we're going to draw the curving over of the petal coming from here. So it's going to go outward. And then come back over here. So you're going to have a shape like this, and then you can erase the line that doesn't make sense inside it. And it's now in front of what we just drew. So now it looks three-dimensional. I'm going to give you some space for that too, some time for that too. Let me fix that a bit here. Okay, so now we're still continuing with the rose here. So we're going to come up here. So we just made this area right here. We're going to continue with it. So coming up here, we're going to make this go kind of curving down towards this part right here. And you're just going to leave that for now. And then right over here, we're going to make the other part of the next petal. So we're going to come down here and curve. And we're going to make this petal on the outside of the inner part of the petal. So for now, we're just going to make kind of a wavy part like this. And just do your best because we'll be doing some adjustments inside, but we're just getting the basic shape of everything. We want to get everything sort of in the right spots as much as possible. Okay, so now we are going to come on the outside here. We're staying here on the right. And we're going to follow this line down and create the curved petal that's happening down here. So we're coming up to where the heart-shaped part is, and we're going to curve our line, and then we're going to go curving upward like so. Now this is the part that is curling under. So we're kind of wrapping around. So right here, it's going to be a little bit strange looking, but it's going to go back down here. And we're going to have to adjust around here again too. So what we did was we took this line and we went upward. We're going to connect it down here. And it's going to kind of come to a bit of a point right here. And then you're going to make the inside of it, which is going to be kind of curving, kind of bumpy until it gets to the bottom part here. And it goes like that. And then we're going to adjust a little bit right over here where we started to make. So we made this shape over here. You may have to do a little adjusting or maybe not, because you should be able to then make a small line here. So if you're not able to, you want to move this curve maybe a little more inward or upward in order to do that. I'm going to make mine a little bit taller. And a little more outward here, like so. And then you can connect this part down here. And you've now got a flipped over or rolled over edge here, like so. Now we're going to leave that little outside part over here alone for a second because we're going to adjust inside here, which may make us adjust the outer part. So we're going to come here to our right to this part of the oval, and we're going to make another oval, but we're going to create a line like so. And then we're going to kind of make like an egg shape. It's going to be a little bit thicker on the bottom, and then it's going to go a little bit thinner at the top for the oval. So like that. And we want to have a line wrapped around it. So we're kind of almost tracing it, connecting it to here, like so. And then we're going to create the next shape next to it, which is the outer petal inside, that's going to kind of be shaped like this. So we're just kind of doing the inside. It's going to look like a dolphin fin. I'm going to make this darker so you can see. Kind of like that. And then for now, you're going to erase those lines inside your little dolphin fin here. So that's the overall shape of the inside of the rest of the rose, until we also want to add curve shape here. See right here. And then we've got one last shape to add. That last shape is going to go like this. And then down like this. Okay, so we went like this. And then like this. And then we just have to draw a little bit of the inside of the opening. All right, so we're getting there. We're almost finished with the rose. The rose is the hardest part. Once you have this area, we're finally going to come to the center part of the rose. And what we're going to do, so we're talking about this part right here. And what we're going to do is we're going to start on the left, and we're going to make this shape to go like this. So that's this line. We're going to come back here. We're going to curve another shape and really thin and go down like this. And then the last part is going to be the circular part. So we're going to make kind of an oval on the side. We're going to break that oval up into like a crescent shape. And then we're going to make what looks like a little rectangle in there. And you've got the center of your rose. You may have to do some adjusting to some of the lines. Cleaning up some of my lines now. And then we can finally deal with the outside shape around this part and make it either a little bigger or a little smaller. It's okay if you go kind of above your threshold there, but we're now making the outside petal. And I'm going to bend mine down. And then this one comes downward. So you now want to adjust this part, and then you're going to add one more little petal back here, like so. And then our final part is just the flipped over part on the left. And that's just over here. So you want to connect this line to here. So that's this line right here. And then you're going to make a line in between because this is the top of the curve of the rolled over part of the rose. Okay, so I'll say that again. So after coming over here and making your line meet up with this one, you're going to come over and then you're going to make the line for the inside of the rose, the petal that's curving over. And now you have a rose. And so our last part is we're going to go down to the stem and the leaves, and then we get to start to color. So, whew, you made it through the first part, and that was hard, right? You did great. Okay, you want to clean up any lines right now, and then before we start, we'll just lighten everything up. Great job. Oh my goodness, that's incredible. Nice job, sweetheart. I love it. I love when kids follow along with the adult programs. They do a great job. Okay, so now we're going to come here to the bottom. And we're going to first come here to the middle part, and we're going to make the sort of bulbous part of the on top of the stem. I don't know what that part's called, but it's going to be kind of like that. And you can see that it's a little over to the left of the bottom of the rose. Once you do that, you're going to make the stem, and it's kind of going to be a little bit curved, curving kind of to the left here. Like so. And the reason for that is there is a leaf in front of it. And also a shadow. Okay, so once we have that, we're going to make that first leaf right here. So we're going to go underneath the rose. We're going to bend. And again, I'm going to make it past my border a bit. And then this part kind of hits the shadow and goes down. And I'm going to adjust a little bit over here. Make it a little bit longer toward the edge here. So it's going to look a little something like this. And then you have to erase underneath where you drew the bottom part. So it should look a little something like that. And then we're going to make the outside one, just a little flat up top. And this one kind of curves downward. And I'm going to make the whole leaf, the whole shape right now, so that you can see the whole shape of it. So it should look like that. And then you're going to make the curved part of the leaf. And then come over here. And because the leaf is turning and you can see underneath it, we add one more line and then another one like that. And then just adjust your shapes accordingly. And then we swing on over finally to the last two here on the left. We make a curve here. And then another curve for the rest of that leaf. And we go outward. We also make the middle of it. And then our final is again kind of making the shape like so. And then pointy at the ends there. Gonna adjust my rose a little bit. Make it just a little bit wider at the top. And now we have our rose. So make your final adjustments, and then you're going to lighten up your lines before we get started with the color. So you're going to see mine's going to get a little bit lighter. And the first color we're going to start with is our red. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be outlining, but not real sharp outlining. What we're doing is we're going to just be getting rid of the graphite lines by going over them in red. So obviously we're starting the rose first. So again, you just want to lighten up your lines. And you can go ahead and also lighten up your greenery lines as well. And now we're going to start with outlining all of our rose edges. So I'm going to start here on the left. And we're outlining, oops, maybe outlining because my red just broke. So you want to continue to outline the whole rose. I'm going to join you in just a second after I get this sharpened. Okay. Much better. Oops, maybe not much better. I'm going to grab another red pencil. Excuse me just a second here. And grabbing my red. Okay. So outlining our rose. Outlining all of the petals here. And then what we're going to do is we're really going to erase away the graphite. As soon as we have our rose all traced out. So on the right side, where I kind of made that line over here on the right side of the rose, you don't want to make that line go all the way across like we originally did. So I just went like this. Just take your time. Just trace all the way around. We're going to do the same with the green as well. So we'll do that in a second too, before we get started on the details of the actual petals here. This is where you can also do some final adjusting to your lines if you realized, oh, I should be over a little more, or shouldn't have drawn that line, or whatever. Okay, so once you draw it with the red, you can then erase on top of your rose, and you will just have the red showing. And just take your time to erase that. And then you're going to grab your green, your regular green, and you're going to do the same thing to the bottom. Actually, you know what? Not your green. Sorry. We're going to grab our purple. This is for the greenery down at the bottom. So you're going to trace over all of the parts in pencil for your greenery. And again, it doesn't have to be real dark, just dark enough to replace the pencil. And just take your time. And then same thing, you're going to take your eraser and you're going to erase away the graphite underneath the colored pencil. And now you've got the right colors to start with or to be outlined with. So you should have sort of an outlining or an actual outlining of your rose with the stem and the leaves to now start fresh with our colors. And now we're going to start with our rose. And what we're going to do is we're going to start first with our red. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with the darker parts first. And then we're going to go lighter with the yellow. So first we're grabbing our red again, and we're going to come down here to the bottom part of the rose. And we're going to go to the left and we're going to add some light kind of shading lines like so on the left here. Let me see if you can see that. I'm going to start going closer so that you're able to see what I'm doing here. So we're going to grab some lines here and then also come over here and we're going to make some lightly shaded lines with the red going in the opposite direction. And then in this part of the rose, we're going to shade around the edge, but inside, like so. And then on top of the shaded part that we just did of those lines. So I'll say that again. So we're taking our red and we traced around, added some shaded lines to the left, curving. Underneath the petal, we added more shaded lines going this way. And now we're going to go up to this petal here. And we're going to start shading in a line like so. This is with our red. And you notice I'm not getting really dark yet. And we're going to shade in lines across, skipping space. And re-outlining. Like so. I'll just grab my other red here. Okay. I have problems at times with Crayola. I don't know if anybody else experiences this, but they break a lot. Okay, so once you do that, we're going to stay here to the left. We're going to come to this petal and make kind of 3 lines like so. And 1 up at the point, and then we're going to shade this area. So what colored pencil does is we start to layer, and that's how we create dimension. So there is some purple in here and some orange, but for now, we're just going to shade with our red like so. We also want to take the opportunity right now to go back with our red and shade a little bit darker on this outside petal part. And we're going to shade on this curved part too. And then we're going to make a darker area right here where it's curving over or flipping over. So we're laying in a lot of the groundwork right now. Now we're going to continue over here, and we're now going to be shading this part, but we're going to add some lines. We're going to stay along the top here, making all of our lines, curving to the left and downward. This is the direction that the petal is turning. It's underneath. So we're kind of making these sort of light directional lines with our red. The next thing we're going to do is we're then going to make the same directional lines, but a little lighter, coming from this petal. So we're going to make them very wispy, and they're kind of curving a little bit. And you're going to keep making those lines until you get to the bottom of the rows, and you're going to go from left to right and kind of fill in that space with light lines. I'm just going to show that up close in case you can't really see. It's going to look like something like that. Now we're still going to stay inside because now we have to do some shading. So we're going to come back up here, and it's darkest right underneath the edge of the curving, kind of the curling. So now we're going to go back and we're going to stay along the edge here, and we're going to make it a little darker. You can press a little on your pencil. See what that's doing for it? And then once you do that, you're going to start shading at the top, but sort of like making some points a little darker, and you're staggering your shadow. So you're probably wondering, well, how do I know how to stagger it? So just kind of follow along like so. And we've now staggered that shadow. Now, before we do anything else to this inner part, we're going to come up to this outside petal again, and we're going to make some of those curved lines that we created a little darker. And we're going to add a little more bolder shading to the top portion where the point is, and then inside, and it's going to really make it look like it's a little more three-dimensional. And now we're going to come back up to this area. And we're going to start lightly shading in red, very light, over the areas that we just made those lines. And you're going to shade everything to almost make like a pinkish. It's just sort of a light pinkish. And then you're going to do the same thing in the outside part of the rose. Just kind of giving it a little bit more color. And then I like to go back and add a little more shading here, the bottom of the rose around the outside. And now we're going to continue upward here. And we're going to make a light shading on top here. This is that curving part. You're going to make some shaded lines coming from the edge of your folded over petal here. Okay, now we're going to get to this middle part here where we're going to retrace sort of the curved part here. And we're going to, again, make some lines going down. And then we're going to shade over those kind of lightly. And then even lighter as it gets to the center. And then once you do that, you're going to shade a little darker along the right edge and a little bit sort of in the crack there of the opening, because there would be a shadow there. And on the left side as well, because there would be a shadow there. So again, we're kind of setting it up, and then we just have to add in our other colors to make it come alive. Same thing is going to happen with our greenery. Okay, so now we're continuing here on the outside, and we're going to shade lightly, like a light pink for this part. On the outside part, we're going to shade a little bit darker, but a little bit lighter at the bottom, because we're going to be layering that with yellow and purple. We're going to get to this part over here and shade very light inside, but leaving the bottom portion here more of the white of the paper. I'm going to now go even closer so you can see the detail here that we're doing. Oops, wrong way. Okay. Now, as we go around here, you're going to make this line a little darker. And then when you shade on this part, you're going to make little lines the opposite way on either side, because it's kind of rolling over. And then you can shade on top of it going the opposite way. So I'll say that again. So with this part, first you make tiny little lines on either side. And I know this part is really tiny. You're leaving the middle part of it sort of the white of the paper. And then you're going over it and shading either side. Which leads us to the next area here, which we're going to darkly trace over this part of the rose. We're going to come down here toward the heart shape. We're going to darken up that line, and then we're going to start making a few random longer lines. We're also going to create another curved line that's going to go towards this line, because this is going to be another shaded area. This is a shadow. You're going to lightly shade it at first. And then we're going to shade from left to right the rest of the rose. So I'm not worrying if the white of the paper is showing. As a matter of fact, I want the white of the paper to show, because we're going to go back and make parts of it darker and then leave other parts for the yellow when we add our yellow, which is going to be next. Okay, so now we're going to add right around this area. We're going to add kind of a curved line, and then we're going to add curved shading going like this right along the edge. So see, I'm going back and forth like so. And then if you want, you can just fill that in a little darker. And then you're also going to start to fill in darker the shaded area you have here. Not too dark though, because we're going to be layering purple and orange on that. And then you're going to shade from left to right along the edge of the heart shape here of the petal until you get to the bottom where your shading expands a little bit. And at this point, you're going to want to then retrace this top part and go even darker in this area. And you can look up if you're not sure exactly what part to do, but it's sort of at the top of the heart-shaped area. And then again, towards the bottom portion of your rose petal. And then you're going to trace around your side again, like so. And then we're going to add shading now to the rest of the rose here with the red at the top by going in the middle parts of this section. We're going to flip over to the middle part here. So we're dealing with the inside parts of the rest of the rose here. And we're adding a little bit of darker shading just where you see it, where I'm going here. Under here. Again, adding our infamous lines. So remember, we're leaving some space for other colors to enter. And then going here in this oval here, and we shade a little bit darker to the left side of it, and then get lighter on the right side here. And then we also lightly shade over that whole area. And then our final part is on the inside of the rose where we start to also make lines coming from the center of the rose. And then we go on the outer side of it. This is just with our red for now. So again, we're going to be going back and adding orange, yellow and purple. So your rose should look a little something like this. And we're going to go down to the leaves real fast and take care of those. And then we'll go back and add the other colors for the rose. But we're going to grab our regular green for the leaves. The leaves go pretty fast. They just have a bunch of colors. So we're going to grab our green and we're going to shade. So same thing. We're kind of doing the darker areas first, in a sense. So we're shading with our green. This is dark green or regular green. And same thing when we get to the lighter parts, we're going to kind of let the white of the paper show and make lines, because we're going to be filling that in with yellow, lemon green, and our sky blue. So the leaves are the darkest at the top where it meets with your rose. So you can shade a little darker, but not real dark, just dark enough. But we're going to add, again, some of the blue and the yellow, and the purple will be the final part. And so what I like to do is, if you notice, I'm kind of making some lines, kind of pre-shaded lines or pre-drawn lines with the green. For the darker areas. So this is all with the green. So follow along at your own pace. You may still be on another section, but if you look up, you can see that I'm just using the green for now. And there are spots where it's a little darker and a little lighter. This is all just the green for now. So I tend to outline in the middle of where the curved lines are of the leaves. And then as I'm going towards the right side, the last two leaves, there's a direction change with the shading. And you'll be able to see that clearly right now. Because I'm just using the green. And then the one all the way on the right, the last petal here, or the last greenery, is a little lighter because we're going to go over it with our yellow and eventually purple. So once you have your green, you then want to start adding yellow. And this is right on top of your green. You're going to kind of give it, this yellow base or second base on all of the leaves, including the stem. So going just, over the whole thing with yellow. You can go darker in some areas, like the stem and above the stem. You can kind of choose where you like. And while you have your yellow in your hands, you're then going to go to your rose. And you're going to add yellow on top of just about everything on the rose, except you're going to go light at first. This is with your yellow. So you're going on top of your red. You're going in the middle spaces. It doesn't have to be a dark yellow. You can go darker on top of your red, like the red parts, but lighter as you're going towards the rest of the rose. This is with your yellow. So right now what we're doing is we grabbed our yellow. We took it to add it to the leaves. And now we're adding it on pretty much all of the rows. When you get to the top, you basically want to do it in the darker parts of the rows, but not so much on the white areas of the rows, except at the top here, where it's kind of flipping over. And if you have any questions about that, you can put them in the chat. But this is with your yellow. And then you're going to grab your light blue, because we're going to go back down to our greenery here. And we're going to add just some of this light blue to on top of the darker areas of our leaves. So again, this light blue is going to be used where your darker areas of your green are. So for instance, on top of your green, the regular green. So in the shadows, at the top of each leaf, and you can add just lines for shading. And then just a little bit shading on the last one here as another layer. And then we're going to go with our lighter yellow green. We're going to add one more green shading to that. And this is through going on top of more our yellow parts with our light green and all over, because we're basically now just tying together the leaves. And then our last part will be adding the purple or violet to really bring out those darks. So a quick kind of doing that to your leaves. And now we're going to go back to the purple. We're going to outline our leaves again in our purple, but this time we're going to concentrate on shading with our purple in the really darker parts of your leaves. We're probably going to be another 5 more minutes, if everyone's okay with that. If not, if you have to leave, this is being recorded just for us to finish off the rows here. So I'm now taking the blue, or the violet, sorry, and outlining the leaves again. And then making parts that are darker, like the tips on the left side, going over the top of the stem part right underneath with some dark lines. This is all with the purple, with the violet. It's amazing what, it looks like black, right? And then going darker right in between the stem and the left, the left leaf here. And then lightly shading on top of the yellow of the stem, but then outlining the stem again, and then going really dark on that right side of the stem on top of the green, but you want to leave the green on the left side. You still want to leave some of that green. So you can lightly kind of shade over it and then add your purple, shading from left to right to make it under there kind of dark. And you're going to continue on the right side here. With our purple. And we're going to hang on to this purple and go into the rose with it as our final part. So you're probably thinking, well, we didn't use the orange. So we made yellow. We made orange with our yellow and our red. But if you want to go back after this class and add a little more orange with your actual orange, you have the option to do that if it's not as colorful for you as you'd like. But we're now using the purple or violet to outline once again our green leaves here. And we're making the darkest parts darker with the violet going over it. And it's amazing that it looks black, right? That is color theory right in front of your eyes. Oftentimes, Actually, almost all the time. Black is not pure black. It's a combination of colors, and our eye sees black. But if you get familiar with color theory, there are really no pure blacks. They're just usually purples, blues, that sort of thing. So it's really cool. Now we do add, the other option too is to get some really dark darks on this. You can add some black to the really dark areas, like underneath the leaves. I've done that, but we probably won't have time to do that. But I can show you quickly if you like. But here's the leaves already, and they're already looking pretty good without the black, but the black just makes them really pop with the dark. And now we finally go into our rose with the purple. And so we lightly start to trace around all of the petals with purple, almost like we're outlining again. With our purple. So that means outlining pretty much everything, each individual petal. And then we add our final shading with the purple. So again, we're making these parts darker. You can add some other lines as you're going around, but if you're not sure, we'll go over those. But for now, you can just retrace your rose in purple. And then the shading is really what brings everything else to life. It's the final piece that brings the darks and really makes the rose look three-dimensional. So just take your time with outlining here. And it should look even pretty good at this step. But then we're going to start with a light shading of purple on everything, starting at the bottom of our rose. So you know how we did the light shading of the red? You're now going to do a light shading of purple over everything. And then we're going to just shade in the darker areas with the purple. So again, this is just a light shading on top of the yellow and the red. Really light if it's just in the center, on pretty much you go darker when you hit the red spots. So now, once we did that shading, you're going to go darker on the petal here to the left in the red part underneath that petal. And then on top. So now you're creating the dark parts of the flower. You know, this is like sort of where we talked about, you know, like the black area would be, or what you perceive as black. So closest to the rose would be a little darker. I'm working here on the left side underneath the rose. This part, you're going to start making the red part underneath. I'm going to put purple on top of that red part, and then also going down into some of the lines here. And you may want to pick up your red pencil again. And even after this class, I know an hour and 15 minutes isn't a whole lot of time to finish, you know, something like this that's very layered, but you're going to get a really good result even just right now. A lot of students that work on their stuff after, though, but you don't have to. Also, you can go back and watch the recording at your own pace. And you can see where I'm adding some of those dark spots. Right here. And probably in about 3 minutes, I would love to see what everybody's looks like. Like I said, you may not be finished, and that's okay, but I'm so curious to see how you made out with this, and hopefully you enjoyed it and you're a bit more relaxed to go into your weekend. That's my hope anyway. I hope I didn't stress you out. I hope I didn't do the opposite. Again, I'm getting here to the top. Again, just making the darks darker by going over them with the purple. And then lightly going over the parts that we already colored in. You can add a very light layering of your purple. And then as we get to the top of the rose here, I like to add a little orange in that part. Since we left so much of the white of the paper there, I like to go in with my orange and even my red and make it a little bit darker right where it's kind of curving from underneath and then along the edge at the tips here before I add my last part of purple. Okay, and then I'm just going to add a little bit of purple here. A little bit of shading. Okay, so I'm going to stop the recording.